các bạn thử sức phần số 2. Nhớ ghi chú thật nhanh. Chắc chắn các bạn phải có 20 giây để xem qua. Xem qua đi. 20 seconds only. Đó, cái nào không hiểu phải đoán nha. Các bạn buộc phải đoán nếu không hiểu. Đừng mong chờ là chúng ta sẽ hiểu hết. Đoán nghĩa nào, đoán nghĩa nào. Rồi đoán vẫn không hiểu thì sẽ phải buộc phải chọn ngẫu nhiên nhé. Ghi từ khóa ra, xong sau đó lát nữa phán đoán không được sẽ chọn ngẫu nhiên. Chúng ta chỉ làm được những cái câu nào nó phù hợp với trình độ hiện tại của chúng ta thôi. Còn câu nào khó thì chúng ta nên chọn ngẫu nhiên. Phán đoán. Đừng để trống, đừng bỏ trống. Go.
Today, we're going to discuss the topic of rudeness, and if people today are ruder than they were, say, 30 years ago. My guests are Laura Barnes and Jeff Swain, who edit the society pages of their newspapers. So, Jeff, are we ruder these days?
Well, we're all familiar with it, aren't we? Loud conversations on mobile phones, on buses and trains, and even theatres and cinemas. Queue barging, road rage, I could go on. And there are those dreadful people, internet trolls I think they're called, who send revolting messages, even death threats, to people whose opinion they disagree with. Another thing, the other day I was in a cafe, and there were 3 or 4 teenagers sitting at one of the tables, and they didn't say a word to each other the whole time they were there, just playing with their mobile phones. Do they not know how to engage socially?
So what are the reasons for this new rudeness? And is it mainly confined to young people?
Young people are certainly much ruder than I would have dared to be when I was a teenager. I say dared because there were rules, if you like, and you risked disapproval if you broke them. Perhaps that's the problem. People don't know what inappropriate behaviour is anymore, or they don't care, or the rules have changed. As to how it all happened, well, there are lots of things to factor in. But I believe it began about the 1950s and 60s with the death of deference. You know, automatic respect for our elders and betters. We began to question the wisdom of their decisions and their competence, and wonder how such fools got to the top of the pile in the first place. All this was for the better, I think, as it broke down barriers in society and was a move to greater equality. But I suppose once the floodgates are opened...
You may be right about that, but I don't entirely agree with you about teenagers. I'm not saying they can't be taught manners and social skills, but they've always been rude, ruder than other age groups. Social ineptitude, lack of confidence, shyness, self-absorption, these are the afflictions of the young. They just don't have enough experience, awareness of others, and knowledge to cope. And certainly these traits are not helped by the wired-up society we live in.
Just a minute. Previous generations had no problems with manners and appropriate social behaviour. If teenagers have been rude throughout the ages, why are they worse now than ever before? I was brought up with the basic good manners of please and thank you notes for gifts received, all that. So by the time I was a teenager, it was as natural as breathing. I think parents and schools play a big part in all this.
I think a lot of parents would rather be their child's friend than their parent, which sends out confusing messages, and lessons in social behaviour go by the wayside. Good manners have to be taught, talked about and put into practice, and not a lot of that goes on these days.
This being England, do you think there's a class aspect to this?
You mean, are some classes ruder than others? I think it's more of a pandemic across all classes and types. In fact, if you ask around in other countries, you'll find that the whole world is getting ruder.
It reminds me of a saying I heard about how a gentleman is never rude by accident. We're not allowed to give offence anymore. The English, or certain classes of the English, used to be very good at being rude or hurtful by being polite. It's an art form that still lives here and there, but seems not to be passed on to the younger generations anymore. So often they miss the point, and irony is a no-go area.
But that's often for the best of reasons. They think irony is exclusive and they don't want to hurt people's feelings, which, despite all we've said, is good manners, if a little unexciting. But then political correctness has done away with a lot of things, not least wit, nuance, and irony in conversation, or the understanding of them.
You mentioned social media earlier. How big a part does this play in the new rudeness?
Quite big, I'd say. Some people believe it is entirely technology-driven. There are two main strands to their argument. First, that it allows you to be anonymous, so you can insult or threaten anybody at any time without anyone knowing who you are. Secondly, that people are so addicted to their electronic devices, they are oblivious to the world around them. This, I think, makes them miss the opportunities to learn how to interact with others of all types and ages.
It's all a bit worrying, isn't it? But I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. So my thanks to Laura and Jeff, and don't forget to tune in on Friday.